At 5:42 a.m., the hospital was silent in a way it never should be. No alarms, no shouting, just the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of polished shoes moving down the corridor in perfect rhythm. 3 men in dark suits walked past the nurses' station without a word. No badges displayed, no explanations offered. Inside the ICU, a man with 17 bullet wounds was still alive, breathing because someone had refused to step back when everyone else hesitated. And somewhere between the trauma bay and the break room, a rookie nurse sat alone, convinced her career had ended hours earlier. She didn't know her name had already been spoken inside a federal briefing. She didn't know decisions made in silence were about to collide with power, secrets, and justice. She only knew one thing: she had done what was right. And now the FBI was here. Before the story begins, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location and local time in the comments. And if you're drawn to stories where quiet courage changes everything, make sure to subscribe. This one doesn't start with applause. It starts with consequences. The night shift at Street. Matthews Regional usually followed a predictable rhythm, controlled chaos wrapped in routine. Ambulances came and went. Charts stacked up. Coffee went cold. For Emily Carter, it was supposed to be another quiet proving ground, another chance to show she belonged in a hospital that still treated her like a temporary guest. She was 6 months into her first year as an ER nurse. Rookie, probationary. The word followed her like a shadow. Emily stood at the nurse's station reviewing vitals on a tablet, her brown hair pulled tight into a bun that had been redone twice already that night. She was small-framed, barely over 5'4", and wore scrubs that still looked too new compared to the faded uniforms around her. Her posture was straight, almost rigid, not from confidence but from effort. She had learned early that any sign of hesitation would be read as weakness. Across the room, nurse supervisor Linda Whitmore watched her with practiced detachment. Linda had been at Street Matthews for over 20 years. She believed in hierarchy, in protocol, in knowing your place. And in her mind, Emily Carter hadn't found hers yet. At 1:17 p.m., the overhead speaker cracked to life. Trauma team to Bay 1. Incoming medevac. 5 minutes out. The room shifted instantly. Chairs scraped back. Conversations died mid-sentence. The calm fractured into motion. Emily looked up, heart rate spiking not with fear but with focus. Medevac meant serious. It meant blood. It meant decisions that didn't wait for permission. "What do we have?" Linda asked sharply, already moving. "Flight reports limited," a clerk replied. "Male. Multiple gunshot wounds. Unidentified. Critical. Multiple gunshot wounds could mean 3 or 10 or something far worse." As the trauma bay was cleared and prepped, Emily washed her hands at the sink, eyes locked on her reflection in the stainless steel panel. She inhaled once, exhaled slowly. She didn't pray. She didn't panic. She centered. The helicopter arrived like a thunderclap on the roof. The sound rattled windows, shook ceiling panels, and sent a low vibration through the bones of the building. Orderlies rushed the gurney in seconds later, flight medics flanking it, their faces grim beneath their helmets. 17 GSWs, one of them shouted. Chest, abdomen, left, thigh, shoulder. 2 through and throughs. 1 lodged near the spine. BP unstable. Lost him twice in the air. 17. Emily's breath caught, but only for a fraction of a second. The patient was tall, broad-shouldered, his body carved with muscle even under trauma dressings soaked in blood. His skin was pale, now lips tinged blue, but there was something unmistakable about the way he was built. Not gym-built. Functional. Conditioned. Move, doctor. Marcus Holloway barked as he entered, snapping on gloves. He was the senior trauma surgeon on duty, brilliant, authoritative, and intolerant of mistakes. "Let's get him transferred. I want a full scan, type, and cross now." As they moved the patient onto the hospital bed, Emily noticed details others didn't. The man's breathing was shallow but controlled, not panicked. Even unconscious, his body wasn't fighting blindly. His hands, though slack, bore calluses in precise places. Not labor, not construction, combat. She caught a glimpse of ink near his ribcage before it disappeared under a fresh bandage. Not decorative, geometric, purposeful. Emily stepped forward. Doctor, his left lung sounds diminished. We might be missing a knot now. Dr. Holloway cut her off without looking. Let's stick to procedure. Emily stepped back, jaw tightening. She watched as monitors were attached, IVs placed, blood drawn. The numbers flickered, heart rate, erratic blood pressure dropping. The room buzzed with overlapping voices, but beneath it all, Emily felt something tightening in her chest. Something wasn't right. BP's falling fast, another nurse called. Push fluids, Holloway said. Prep for imaging. Emily moved automatically, handing over supplies, adjusting lines. Then she saw it, the patient's right shoulder twitched. Just once, not a seizure, a reflex. She leaned closer, eyes narrowing. His airway pressure spiked briefly, then settled. A subtle change, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Dr. Emily said again, louder now. I think he's compensating for an internal bleed. His breathing pattern, I said, not now, Holloway snapped, finally turning. His eyes flicked to her badge. Rookie, you want to talk theory, do it later. Linda shot Emily a warning look from across the room. Emily swallowed hard but didn't look away. The gurney started rolling toward imaging when the monitor screamed. Flat, piercing, unmistakable. Vitals dropping, someone shouted. The patient's body convulsed once, then stilled. Stop, Holloway ordered. Back to Bay 1. Now, they wheeled him back in seconds. Chest compressions started. Medication called out. Time compressed into sharp commands and flashing numbers. Emily moved with them, her hands steady even as her pulse thundered. She repositioned the oxygen mask instinctively and felt resistance. Wrong angle. She adjusted again, pressing gently at the base of the neck. The oxygen saturation ticked up. Just a point, then another. Who did that? Holloway demanded. Emily didn't answer. She was watching the patient's chest, counting breaths, seeing the way the left side lagged. There's pressure building, she said. If we don't relieve it, we're not cutting without confirmation, Holloway replied. Get him stable first. The monitor dipped again. This time the room went quiet, not because no one was speaking, but because everyone felt it. They were losing him. Emily looked at the man's face, at the faint scar along his jaw, at the tension even in unconsciousness. Whoever he was, he hadn't come this far to die in a hallway debate. She made a decision, one that would follow her for the rest of her life. Doctor, she said, voice firm, clear, cutting through the noise. If we wait, he's gone. Holloway stared at her, really stared for the first time. The seconds stretched, and somewhere above them the helicopter blades finally fell silent. For half a second no one moved. The trauma bay, normally a storm of motion, hung suspended in a fragile stillness as if the room itself were holding its breath. The heart monitor stuttered, then emitted a slow warning beep that sounded far too deliberate. Dr. Marcus Holloway's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked from the monitor to the patient, then back to Emily Carter. You're asking me to needle decompress without imaging, he said slowly, each word measured. On a hunch, Emily didn't flinch. On a pattern, she replied. His breathing is asymmetric. His neck veins are distended. He's compensating, but he's running out of room. Linda Whitmore inhaled sharply. Emily, that's enough. If this is tension pneumothorax. Emily continued, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. Every second we wait increases the pressure on his heart. That's why his vitals keep crashing. Holloway stared at the patient again. Blood soaked through fresh gauze. The man's chest rose unevenly, the left side barely moving now. The monitor dipped, hard. Doctor, another nurse said urgently, we're losing pressure again. Holloway cursed under his breath. Years of training, battled instinct protocol, wrestling with reality. He hated improvisation, not because it failed, but because it couldn't be defended after the fact. Emily saw the hesitation. She also saw the clock. I'll take responsibility, she said. Put it on me. That got his attention. You're on probation, Holloway said. You understand what you're risking. Yes, Emily replied. But he's risking more. Silence stretched. The seconds pressed in, heavy and unforgiving. Prep the kit, Holloway snapped suddenly. Now. Linda's eyes widened. Marcus, I said now. The room exploded back into motion. A needle decompression kit appeared in Emily's hands before she realized she'd reached for it. Her fingers moved from muscle memory, drilled into her during countless simulations she'd been told she'd never need to use alone. Holloway stepped aside just enough to let her work, but not enough to absolve himself. If you're wrong, he said quietly, this ends your career. Emily nodded once. She located the second intercostal space by touch, ignoring the blood, the noise, the pounding of her own heart. She cleaned the area, lined up the needle, and paused for a fraction of a second, not from fear but from precision. Then she pushed. A sharp hiss filled the room as trapped air escaped. The effect was immediate. The patient's chest expanded more evenly. The oxygen saturation climbed 88, 90, 92. The heart monitor steadied into a stronger rhythm. A collective exhale swept the room. "Damn it," Holloway muttered. She was right. No one said anything else. They didn't need to. The crisis eased, but the tension didn't. Emily stepped back, hands trembling now that the moment had passed. She tucked them behind her back, willing them still. Holloway gave her a look she couldn't quite read, not approval, not anger. Something unsettled. "Stabilize him," he ordered. "Prep for surgery. We're not out of this yet." As the patient was rushed toward the operating room, Emily caught a brief glimpse of his eyes fluttering beneath half-closed lids. He wasn't conscious, not fully, but his fingers curled once, almost imperceptibly, as if anchoring himself to something unseen. Or someone. Emily followed the gurney until Linda stepped in front of her. "That was reckless," Linda hissed under her breath. "You don't get to make calls like that." "I didn't make the call," Emily said quietly. "I made the case." Linda shook her head. "That won't matter when this goes to review." The words landed harder than Emily expected. She watched as the OR doors swung shut, sealing the patient away. The adrenaline drained from her body all at once, leaving behind exhaustion and a creeping sense of dread. Because saving a life didn't mean you were safe. It meant you were exposed. The hours that followed blurred together. Emily assisted where she was allowed, waited where she wasn't. She cleaned equipment, updated charts, avoided the looks thrown her way, some impressed, some disapproving. At 2:03 a.m., Dr. Holloway emerged from the OR, scrubbing his hands with a vigor that bordered on aggression. He made it through, he announced to no one in particular. For now, relief washed over the room in quiet waves. Emily sagged against the counter just for a moment. 17 entry wounds, Holloway continued. "We removed 3 bullets. 2 more lodged too close to the spine to risk. Whoever this guy is, he's not built like a civilian." Emily looked up. "You noticed that too?" Holloway studied her for a long second. "I noticed a lot tonight." Before she could respond, Linda appeared, clipboard already in hand. "Emily Carter," she said coolly. "I need you in my office." Emily's stomach dropped. The office smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Linda closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "You violated protocol," Linda said. "You acted without authorization, and you put the hospital at risk." "I saved his life," Emily replied. "That's not the point," Linda snapped. "This isn't a hero movie. This is a hospital. We answer to boards, to lawyers." Emily clenched her fists. "So if he'd died, then we'd have followed procedure," Linda interrupted. "And no one would be asking why a rookie nurse took matters into her own hands." The words stung because they were true. "I'm filing an incident report," Linda continued. "Administration will review it in the morning. Until then, you're to remain on duty, but you are not to make any independent clinical decisions." "Understood," Emily nodded, though her throat burned. She returned to the ICU just before dawn. The patient lay motionless, ventilator breathing for him now. Machines hummed, softly, steady and alive. Emily stood at his bedside, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. "I don't know who you are," she murmured under her breath, "but I hope it was worth it." As if in response, the patient's fingers twitched again. This time he spoke, barely audible, fragmented, but unmistakable. "Didn't have a choice." Emily leaned closer. "What? Neither. Did you?" Her breath caught. Before she could say another word, footsteps approached. Linda's voice echoed down the hall, sharp and purposeful. "Emily, administration wants a word first thing this morning." Emily straightened slowly. The night had saved a life. The morning was about to test hers. The operating room lights dimmed to a soft amber as the surgical team rotated out, leaving behind the low hum of machines and the quiet vigilance of the ICU. Emily Carter stood just outside the glass, arms folded tight against the chill that crept up her spine. Dawn was beginning to bruise the horizon through narrow windows at the end of the corridor, painting the floor with thin bands of grey-blue light. She hadn't slept. She hadn't sat down. And she hadn't stopped replaying the moment the needle broke skin and air hissed free. Linda Whitmore's incident report sat like a weight in Emily's pocket, unfinished but inevitable. Administration would read it with fresh eyes and clean hands far removed from the blood and seconds that had forced a choice. Emily knew how these stories usually ended. Policy rarely bent for people like her. Inside the ICU, the patient, still unidentified on the chart, lay sedated ventilator cycling with mechanical patience. Emily watched the rise and fall of his chest, counting breaths without realizing she was doing it. 6 months into the job and she already carried habits that never switched off. Emily, she turned. Dr. Holloway stood a few feet away, scrub cap tucked under his arm, his face lined with fatigue that softened his usual severity. "You should go home," he said. "You're not scheduled." "I'm fine," she replied. "I can help." Holloway hesitated. "You've helped enough for one night." There was something careful in his tone now. Measured. Not apologetic, but not dismissive either. "They'll review everything," he added. "Your actions. Mine. The call." Emily met his gaze. "Would you make the same decision again?" Holloway didn't answer right away. He looked through the glass at the patient, at the cluster of machines that testified to how close they'd come. "Yes," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean they'll see it that way." Emily nodded. She'd expected nothing else. By 7:30 a.m., the hospital had shifted into daytime mode. The night staff rotated out. Fresh faces filled the corridors, unaware of how close death had passed through the building just hours earlier. Coffee cups replaced crash carts. Voices grew louder. Laughter even surfaced, tentative and misplaced. Emily remained. Linda reappeared with a hospital administrator in tow, Robert Klein. He wore a tailored suit that looked wrong against the sterile walls, his tie knotted too perfectly for a place where blood still stained the drains. Emily Carter Klein said, offering a smile that never reached his eyes. "Let's have a quick conversation." The conference room smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet judgment. Klein took the head of the table. Linda sat beside him, posture rigid. Emily remained standing. "I've reviewed the preliminary notes," Klein began. "There are concerns." Emily waited. "You acted outside your scope," he continued. "Regardless of outcome that exposes the hospital to significant liability." "I followed my training," Emily said calmly. "And the patient survived because of it." Klein's smile tightened. "That's not how these things are evaluated." Linda slid the clipboard across the table. "Sign the acknowledgement," she said. "It's not an admission of guilt, just confirmation you understand the process." Emily looked down at the paper. Words like deviation, unauthorized intervention, risk exposure leapt out at her. There was no space to explain urgency. No room for seconds. She signed. "Good," Klein said. "We'll reconvene after a full review. Until then, you're to remain on standard duties only." Emily nodded again, though something inside her hardened. She returned to the ICU just as a respiratory therapist adjusted the ventilator. The patient's vitals were stable for now, but Emily noticed a subtle change. His heart rate climbed a few beats, then settled. His fingers flexed beneath the blanket. "Easy," she murmured more to herself than him. She checked the IV lines, the monitors, the pressure readings. Everything read within range. And yet, she frowned. There it was again. A brief spike in airway pressure. A shallow hitch in the rhythm. Not enough to set off alarms. Enough to be wrong. Emily leaned in, scanning the surgical notes. 2 bullets still lodged. 1 near the spine. 1 near the diaphragm. The risk of secondary complications loomed like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. She pressed the call button. The attending physician on the day shift arrived minutes later, flipping through the chart with a practiced air of detachment. "Vitals look acceptable," he said. "We'll continue to monitor." "He's compensating again," Emily replied. "Subtly, but it's there." The physician glanced at her badge. "Rookie." "Let's not overreact," he said. "We'll wait." Emily felt the familiar frustration rise, but this time she held it down. She had already crossed one line. Crossing another without authority would be fatal to her career. So she watched and waited. By mid-morning, the patient stirred. Not fully awake, but enough that the sedation had to be adjusted. His eyes opened briefly, dark, focused, startlingly alert for someone who'd been shot 17 times. They locked onto Emily. Recognition flickered there. Not confusion. Not fear. "Hey," she said softly. "You're safe. You're in a hospital." His gaze didn't waver. "Name," he rasped. "We'll get to that later," she replied gently. "You need to rest." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Figures." Before she could ask what he meant, the door opened and Linda stepped in, clipboard in hand once more. "Emily," she said, "I need you to step out." Emily obeyed, though every instinct screamed to stay. In the hallway, Linda lowered her voice. "Administration has decided to document your actions as a near-miss incident." Emily's chest tightened. "Near miss. As in, it could have gone wrong," Linda said. "They're protecting the hospital. By blaming me." Linda didn't deny it. "You should consider yourself lucky," she added. "They're not suspending you yet." Emily stared at the floor, jaw clenched. She thought of the patient's steadying vitals, of the hiss of escaping air, of the seconds no policy could save. "Is he in danger?" Emily asked quietly. Linda hesitated. "That's not your concern anymore." Emily returned to the nurse's station, her world narrowing to tasks and time. Noon came and went. The hospital buzzed with normalcy again, as if the night had been a dream. Then the front desk called. They didn't announce it overhead. They didn't make a scene. They simply called administration and said 3 men were asking for access to the ICU. They were polite, calm, and they didn't give their names. Emily looked up as Linda hurried past, her face pale. "Who is it?" Emily asked. Linda didn't answer. Moments later, the elevator doors opened. 3 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits, moving with quiet purpose. No badges visible, no expressions wasted. One of them glanced around the floor, eyes scanning faces. Then his gaze landed on Emily Carter, and he nodded. The nod was small, barely a gesture, but it hit Emily Carter like a physical force. She froze for half a second too long, fingers hovering above the keyboard at the nurse's station. The man who had looked at her didn't smile. Didn't speak. He simply acknowledged her presence as if he already knew who she was and what she had done. Then he turned away and followed Linda Whitmore toward administration. Whispers rippled through the floor. "Who are they? Lawyers, federal?" Emily swallowed and forced herself to breathe. She told herself it was coincidence. That hospitals saw suits all the time. That she was projecting meaning onto a moment because she was exhausted and anxious and already bracing for the worst. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She returned to the ICU, drawn back to the patient's bedside, like a compass needle snapping north. He lay quieter now, sedation deeper, the ventilator carrying the burden of each breath. The machines hummed steadily, but Emily's eyes never left his chest. There it was again, a subtle delay on the left side, a micro-pause between mechanical breaths. Almost nothing. Almost. She checked the readings again. Numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't tell the whole truth. Not if you didn't know what to look for. Emily adjusted the bed angle by a few degrees, pretending to tidy lines as she did it. The airway pressure dipped slightly, then stabilized. Her heart pounded. She had no authority, no permission, no margin left. "Why won't you just rest?" she whispered, more plea than question. As if hearing her, the patient's brow furrowed. His fingers twitched beneath the blanket, the same controlled movement she'd seen before. Not random. Intentional. A fighter's reflex. Emily straightened as footsteps approached. "Doctor." Holloway entered the ICU, flanked by a younger resident carrying a tablet. "Any changes?" Holloway asked. Emily hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Something's off," she said carefully. "He's compensating again. I think pressure's building near the diaphragm wound." The resident frowned. "Vitals are stable." "For now," Emily replied. "But he's doing the work himself. You can see it if you watch long enough." Holloway studied the patient in silence. 30 seconds passed. Then another. He saw it. "Order imaging," he said abruptly. "Now." The resident blinked. "Sir, administration, I'll handle administration," Holloway snapped. "Move." Emily exhaled relief and dread colliding in her chest. The scan confirmed it. A slow internal bleed masked by the body's extraordinary ability to adapt under pressure. Left untreated, it would have spiraled fast. "Prep him," Holloway ordered. "We're going back in." As the OR team mobilized again, Linda reappeared, her expression tight. "Marcus," she said sharply, "Robert Klein wants a word before you. He can wait," Holloway replied. "This can't." Linda looked at Emily, something conflicted, flickering in her eyes. "You," she said. "You stay out of this." Emily nodded, but she stayed close. The second surgery stretched on for hours. Longer than the first. More delicate. When Holloway finally emerged, his shoulders sagged with the weight of it. "He'll live," he said quietly. Emily closed her eyes. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a countdown. By late afternoon, the hospital administration was no longer subtle. Meetings were called. Doors closed. Voices dropped. Emily was asked politely but firmly to wait in the break room. She sat alone at the small plastic table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Through the thin wall, she could hear muffled conversation. Her name floated in and out of it, stripped of context. She overstepped. Saved him. Liability. Federal interest. Federal. Her stomach twisted. The door opened. Linda stepped in, her composure fraying at the edges. "They're asking questions," she said flatly. "Who is?" Emily asked. Linda hesitated. "Men from Washington." That was all she said, but it was enough. Minutes later, Emily was escorted not to administration, but to a smaller conference room she'd never been in before. No windows. No nameplate. The kind of room that existed for conversations not meant to leave it. 3 men waited inside. The same 3 from the elevator. Up close, they looked even more unremarkable. Average height. Neutral suits. The kind of faces you'd forget 5 minutes after passing them on the street. One of them gestured to a chair. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice calm and level. "Thank you for your time." She sat. "I'm Aaron Cole," he continued. "This is Mark Evans and Daniel Wright." No titles offered. "We're conducting a routine inquiry," Cole said. "You were on duty during the patient's admission last night." "Yes," Emily replied. "Walk us through what happened," Cole said. "In your own words." Emily took a breath and told the truth. She spoke of the helicopter, the wounds, the moments that didn't add up, the decisions she made when time collapsed into instinct. No embellishment, no defense. When she finished, the room was silent. Cole studied her for a long moment. "Did you know who he was?" "No," Emily said immediately. "I still don't." A flicker passed between the men, something unreadable. "And if you had known?" Cole asked. Emily met his gaze. It wouldn't have changed anything. Cole leaned back slightly, as if considering that answer. "Why?" he asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "Because he was dying." Another pause. "Did anyone instruct you to take the actions you did?" Cole asked. "No." "Did anyone pressure you?" "No." "Did anyone threaten you afterward?" Emily hesitated just enough. "Administration made it clear my actions were inconvenient," she said carefully. Cole nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "We may need to speak again," he said. "For now, continue your duties as normal." "That's it?" Emily asked, surprised. "For now," Cole replied. As she stood to leave, he added, "You did your job." The words landed heavier than praise. Emily returned to the ICU as evening settled in. The patient was back, stabilized, guarded now by 2 men who hadn't been there before. They stood quietly near the door, blending into the background in a way that screamed intention. Emily checked the chart. For the first time, a name appeared. Daniel Reyes. She stared at it. The man in the bed stirred again, eyes opening just enough to find her. "Still here," he murmured. "Yes," Emily said softly. "You are too." A faint smile touched his lips. "Figures." Before she could ask anything more, one of the guards cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said gently, "that's all for now." Emily stepped back, her mind racing. Because nothing about this was routine anymore. And somewhere deep in the hospital, quiet wheels were already turning far beyond her reach. By the time night fell again, St. Matthew's Regional felt like a different hospital. Nothing visible had changed. The lights still hummed. The monitors still beeped. Stretchers rolled past with the same familiar squeak of worn wheels. But beneath the surface, an invisible pressure had settled in thick, watchful, unspoken. Emily Carter felt it the moment she stepped back onto the floor. Conversation stopped when she approached. Eyes flicked away too quickly. A few nurses offered tight smiles, the kind meant to signal support without inviting trouble. Others avoided her entirely, as if proximity alone might draw unwanted attention. Word had spread. Not the truth, not what actually happened in the trauma bay, but a version of it. A safer one. A quieter one. Did you hear someone whispered near the supply room? She went rogue. Administration's furious. Federal guys were asking about her. Emily pretended not to hear. She checked assignments, reviewed charts, focused on the tangible. It was easier than confronting the growing knot in her chest. Linda Whitmore passed her once in the hallway, clipboard tucked tight against her side. She didn't stop, didn't scold, didn't acknowledge Emily at all. That worried her more than anger would have. The ICU was under tighter control now. Security badges were checked. Doors that usually remained open were closed. 2 unfamiliar men remained stationed outside Daniel Reyes's room, their presence unobtrusive but unmistakable. Emily wasn't assigned to him anymore. She noticed that immediately. Her name was absent from his care rotation, replaced by 2 senior nurses and 1 charge nurse. On paper, it made sense experience mattered with critical patients. In practice, it felt like erasure. She stood at the nurse's station, watching the glass wall from a distance. Daniel lay still, sedated again, the ventilator rising and falling with quiet precision. A faint bruise colored his jaw, now the aftermath of tubes and hands and urgency. He was alive. That should have been enough. At 10:14 p.m., the front desk called the floor. Linda answered this time. Emily watched her, stiffened fingers tightening around the receiver. "Yes," Linda said, after a moment. "I'll let him know." She hung up and scanned the room until her eyes landed on Emily. "Administration wants to see you," she said. "Now." Emily nodded, her stomach sinking. The administrator's office was dimly lit, the overhead lights softened as if to make difficult conversations easier to swallow. Robert Klein sat behind his desk jacket off, now sleeves rolled up in a performance of approachability. "Emily," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "Have a seat." She didn't. "I prefer to stand," she said quietly. Klein's smile faltered, then returned thinner. "I'll get right to it," he said. "Given the events of the last 24 hours, we've decided it's best to place you on temporary administrative leave." The words landed exactly as she'd feared. "Paid," he added quickly. "This is not a termination. It's a precaution. A precaution against what Emily asked. Against liability," Klein replied. "Against misinterpretation. Against things spiraling out of control." Emily folded her arms. "I saved a patient's life. And we're grateful," Klein said smoothly. "Truly. But hospitals operate on trust in systems in structure. When individuals act independently, even with good intentions, it creates risk. So I'm the risk," Emily said. Klein hesitated just long enough to confirm it. "This will give everyone time to breathe," he said. "Time for reviews to conclude. Time for outside interest to dissipate." Outside interest. Emily's jaw tightened. "The men who asked me questions earlier." Klein's eyes flicked away. "I can't comment on that." "When does the leave start?" Emily asked. "Immediately," Klein said. "You can finish your shift tonight. After that, security will deactivate your badge until further notice." Security. The word echoed in her head as she turned and walked out. She finished her rounds in silence, moving through tasks on muscle memory alone. She documented carefully, triple-checked medications, handed off patients with clinical precision. If this was her last shift for a while, she wouldn't give them a single reason to doubt her competence. Near midnight, she found herself outside the ICU again. Daniel Reyes's door was closed now. The guards remained, their attention alert but calm. One of them recognized her and inclined his head slightly, not permission but acknowledgement. Emily didn't try to enter. Instead, she rested her hand briefly against the cool glass. "You made it," she whispered. "That's what matters." At 1247 a.m., her shift ended. She changed in the locker room, folding her scrubs with care she hadn't expected from herself. When she clipped her badge to her bag, she paused, staring at it for a long moment. Rookie nurse, ER. She wondered how easily that title could be taken away. As she walked toward the exit, the hospital felt unusually quiet. Too quiet for a facility that never truly slept. The air outside was cold, biting against her skin as she stepped into the parking lot. That's when she saw them. Two black SUVs sat near the curb engines, idling lights off. They weren't marked. They didn't block traffic. They simply waited. Emily stopped walking. One of the rear doors opened. A man stepped out, the same one who had nodded at her earlier. Aaron Cole. "Emily Carter," he said softly. "Do you have a moment?" Her pulse quickened. "Am I required to?" "No," Cole replied. "But I think you'll want to hear this." She hesitated, then nodded. They didn't invite her into the vehicle. Cole leaned casually against the door, hands visible, posture relaxed. "The patient you treated," he said. "He's stable. Transferring soon." Emily exhaled. "Good. There's been interference," Cole continued, "from people more concerned with containment than care." Emily looked at him. "Are you telling me I did something wrong?" Cole met her gaze. "No. I'm telling you that you did something inconvenient." She almost laughed. "What happens now?" she asked. "For you," Cole said. "Nothing. For the hospital." He paused. "That depends on what we find." "And me being put on leave?" Emily asked. Cole's expression darkened slightly. Temporary measures have a way of becoming permanent when no one pushes back. Emily clenched her hands at her sides. "So what am I supposed to do for now?" Cole said. "Go home, rest, and be available." "Available for what?" Cole opened the SUV door, then stopped. "For the truth." The door closed. The SUVs pulled away, disappearing into the night without a sound. Emily stood alone in the parking lot, long after they were gone. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel afraid. She felt watched. And as dawn crept closer, painting the sky with pale light, Emily Carter realized something she couldn't unlearn. Saving a life was only the beginning. The consequences were just getting started. Emily Carter didn't sleep. She lay on her narrow apartment bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling fan as it traced slow, useless circles above her. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the hiss of escaping air again, saw the monitor dip, felt the weight of the needle in her hand. Inconvenient. The word replayed louder than any accusation. By 8:06 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Emily hesitated before answering. "Hello, Emily Carter," a familiar voice said calmly. "Aaron Cole." Her stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "No," Cole replied. "Not yet, but things are moving faster than expected." She sat up. "About the hospital, about the people inside it," Cole said. "We'd like to ask you a few more questions. Off the record." Emily glanced at the clock, at the badge lying uselessly on her kitchen counter. "Where?" "Our field office," Cole replied. "I'll send the address." This isn't a summons, but it matters. 10 minutes later, she was in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. The FBI field office was nondescript by design, low concrete building, neutral signage, no flags waving out front. Emily parked, heart pounding, and reminded herself she had nothing to hide. Inside, the air felt different, quieter, sharper. Conversations were clipped, purposeful. Cole met her at the security desk and led her down a hallway lined with closed doors. They stopped at a small interview room. "No recording," Cole said, gesturing for her to sit. "Just clarity." Emily folded her hands in her lap. "About Daniel Reyes." Cole studied her face. "You're careful with names." "I didn't choose it," she said. "It appeared in the chart." Cole nodded. "Do you know what he was doing before he arrived at your hospital?" "No." "Do you know why he had 17 gunshot wounds?" "No." "Do you know who ordered the internal report against you within 40 minutes of stabilization?" Emily blinked. "No." Cole leaned back. "You should." He slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were printed emails, timestamps, highlighted sender names redacted except one, Robert Klein. Emily's chest tightened as she read. Subject lines spoke volumes: exposure risk, federal sensitivity, contain narrative. "This wasn't about patient safety," Emily said quietly. "No," Cole replied. "It was about control. Control of what?" Cole's eyes hardened. "Of a failure that didn't belong to you." Emily looked up. "You're saying this was bigger than the hospital?" "I'm saying the hospital became a convenient shield," Cole answered. "Someone wanted Daniel Reyes alive but quiet, and someone else wanted the circumstances of his survival managed." Emily swallowed. "And me?" Cole's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You were a variable no one planned for." The room fell silent. Why tell me this? Emily asked. Because truth matters, Cole said. And because people like you tend to doubt themselves when pressure comes from above. Emily thought of Linda, of Klein, of the word liability used like a weapon. I didn't do anything wrong, she said. No, Cole agreed. You did something right at the wrong time. He stood. That's all for now. As he opened the door, he paused. One more thing. Yes, Daniel Reyes is awake, Cole said, and he asked for you. The words hit harder than any accusation. I'm not assigned to him, Emily said. That won't matter much longer, Cole replied. By the time Emily returned to Street Matthews, the hospital was buzzing, but not with its usual rhythm. Security presence had doubled. Administrators clustered in hushed groups. Someone had pulled fire drill protocols, clearing certain corridors without explanation. Emily's badge didn't work. She wasn't surprised. A security officer escorted her not unkindly to the ICU waiting area. The two guards outside Daniel's room stepped aside without a word. Inside the room was dim. Daniel Reyes lay propped slightly upright now, color-improved eyes alert despite the lines and machines tethering him to the bed. He turned his head when Emily entered. There you are, he said softly. She approached, pulse racing. How are you feeling? Like I lost an argument with gravity, he replied. But alive. She smiled, despite herself. You had us worried. You, he corrected. You stayed. Emily hesitated. I wasn't supposed to. Daniel studied her eyes sharp, even through pain. That tracks. A beat passed. They told me you might lose your job, he said. Emily shrugged. They say a lot of things. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not because of me. Not because of you, she replied gently. Because of what I chose. He looked away, then back. You didn't hesitate. I did, Emily said. Just not long enough. Daniel nodded slowly. That's the difference. The door opened quietly. Aaron Cole stepped in, followed by a woman Emily hadn't seen before. Dark suit, precise posture, eyes that missed nothing. Emily Carter, the woman said. I'm Deputy Director Susan Hale. Emily straightened instinctively. Hale's gaze moved between Emily and Daniel. I'll be brief. The internal actions taken against Nurse Carter are under federal review. Klein's name wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. Until that review concludes, Hale continued, any disciplinary measures are suspended. Emily's breath caught. You're free to return to duty, Hale said. If you choose. Emily glanced at Daniel, then back at Hale. I choose. Hale nodded once. Good. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. One more thing, Nurse Carter. Yes, Hale's eyes held hers. Did you know who he was when you acted? Emily didn't hesitate. No. And if you had, Emily met her, gaze voice steady, it wouldn't have changed anything. Hale studied her for a long moment, then she smiled just barely. Exactly. As they left, Daniel exhaled. Told you, he murmured. Wrong time. Emily laughed softly, tension finally loosening its grip. But as she stepped back into the hallway, she felt it again, that quiet pressure. Not from the hospital, not from the FBI, from something unresolved. Because investigations didn't end cleanly, and people who tried to manage the truth rarely went down without a fight. By noon, the hospital felt like it was holding its breath. The official word disciplinary measures suspended spread quickly but not evenly. It moved in fragments carried by whispers and half-glances filtered through disbelief and quiet recalculation. Emily Carter returned to the floor wearing the same scrubs, the same badge, yet everything about how people looked at her had changed. Respect didn't arrive loudly. It never did. It arrived in space. Nurses stepped aside without being asked. A resident deferred to her observation without checking her credentials first. Even Linda Whitmore, clipboard still clutched like armor, nodded once as Emily passed, tight-lipped but unmistakable. Emily didn't celebrate. She didn't slow down. She worked. Daniel Reyes remained under guarded care, though the guards were now less visible, blending into the rhythm of the unit, like shadows. Emily was officially reassigned to his care on paper, a neutral decision in reality, a quiet acknowledgement of who had kept him alive. When she entered his room that afternoon, Daniel was awake, eyes open, studying the ceiling. You're back, he said. I never really left, Emily replied, checking his vitals. He smiled faintly. Feels different. It is, she said. You're stable. For now. She met his gaze. You don't like that word. No, he said. I like prepared. She adjusted the IV, noticing the way his muscles tensed, not in pain, but in alertness. Even confined to a bed, he carried himself like someone used to controlling space. Agent Cole told me there's an investigation, Daniel said quietly. Yes, about the hospital. About decisions, Emily replied. And motives. Daniel nodded. Good. He fell silent for a moment, then spoke again. You should know. People died because of what happened before I got here. Emily paused. I'm sorry. He shook his head slightly, not looking for sympathy, just clarity. I was part of a joint operation, domestic, sensitive. It went sideways. Emily listened without interrupting. Someone leaked our route, Daniel continued. Someone wanted us exposed but not erased. Hurt enough to make a point. And you, Emily asked. I was collateral, he said. Or leverage. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. Before she could respond, the door opened. Robert Klein stepped inside, flanked by a lawyer Emily recognized from the hospital board meetings. Klein's face was composed, but the lines around his mouth were deeper, now etched by strain. Daniel Reyes, Klein said smoothly. I hope you're recovering well. Daniel didn't answer. Klein turned to Emily. Nurse Carter. A word Emily straightened. If it's about patient care, you can say it here. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. This is administrative, Klein said, and confidential. Daniel's eyes flicked to Emily. Stay. Emily did. Klein exhaled through his nose. Very well. I wanted to clarify that any previous misunderstandings regarding Nurse Carter's actions have been addressed internally. Misunderstandings, Daniel echoed flatly. Yes, Klein said. Procedural misalignments. Daniel laughed once, a short, humorless sound that startled everyone in the room. You almost cost her everything, he said. To protect yourself. Klein's jaw tightened. With respect, Mr. Reyes, you don't understand how hospitals operate. Daniel met his gaze, eyes hard. With respect, Mr. Klein, I understand exactly how cover-ups operate. The room went still. Klein's lawyer cleared his throat. We're not here to... No, Daniel interrupted. You're here to see if I'll stay quiet. Klein's composure cracked just slightly. We're here to ensure there are no misinterpretations of intent. Emily felt the weight of the moment press in. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about power testing boundaries. I have already spoken with federal authorities, Daniel said calmly. Everything I say from now on goes through them. Klein paled. Good day, Daniel added. Klein hesitated, then turned and left without another word. The lawyer followed footsteps too quick to be dignified. When the door closed, Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, she said softly. Daniel shrugged. You earned it. That evening, the first real consequences arrived. Hospital board members were summoned on short notice. Internal emails were seized. Compliance officers appeared, their questions sharp and unyielding. Linda Whitmore was called into a closed-door meeting and did not return to the floor. Rumors flew, but this time they carried teeth. Emily worked through it all, grounding herself in tasks and patience in the simple truth of what she did best. Still, she felt the undercurrent shifting, the balance tipping. Near the end of her shift, Aaron Cole found her by the medication room. It's moving, he said quietly. What is? Emily asked. Accountability, Cole replied. Klein authorized the report against you before all facts were available. He also withheld material information from federal liaisons. Emily's heart pounded. What happens now? Cole's expression was unreadable. That's up to the board and the Department of Justice. And me. You keep doing your job, he said. You've done enough. As Cole walked away, Emily felt something she hadn't felt since that first night relief, unburdened by fear. But the day wasn't done with her yet. A call came through from the ICU. Daniel's vitals had shifted, not dangerously, but decisively. Emily hurried to his room. He was awake, more alert than she'd seen him. They're moving me, he said before she could ask. We're secure facility, he replied. Recovery will continue there. She nodded. That's good. He watched her for a moment. You know where I come from, we don't say thank you the way civilians do. Emily smiled faintly. I don't need it. Daniel reached out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Still, you should hear this. She leaned closer. "If anyone ever questions your judgment," he said quietly, "tell them a SEAL trusted you with his life." Her throat tightened. "I will," she whispered. As orderlies arrived to prepare the transfer, Emily stepped back, giving them space. She watched as they disconnected. Machines replaced lines, wrapped him in careful layers. When the gurney rolled toward the elevator, Daniel looked back once. He nodded. This time, Emily understood the weight of it. As the doors closed, the hospital seemed to exhale at last. But beyond its walls, far beyond the quiet corridors and humming machines, forces were still in motion, documents reviewed, decisions weighed, reputations unraveling. The truth had surfaced, and it wasn't done claiming its due. The day Daniel Reyes was transferred out, Street Matthews Regional didn't announce it. No overhead pages. No security escort through the main halls. No visible ceremony of any kind. The gurney moved through a service corridor, elevators locked down for exactly 43 seconds, and then he was gone, lifted into a world that existed parallel to Emily Carter's, close enough to touch, but forever out of reach. By the end of that shift, the hospital felt lighter. By the next morning, it felt exposed. The Federal Review didn't arrive with flashing lights or shouted commands. It arrived in binders, subpoenas, and people who didn't ask permission before opening doors. Emily noticed the first sign at 612 A.M. The compliance office was sealed. At 6202, unfamiliar faces stood at the nurse's station, flipping through logs without speaking to anyone. At 631, Linda Whitmore's name disappeared from the assignment board. By 700, no one was pretending anymore. "Have you been interviewed?" a nurse whispered to Emily near the med room. "Not today," Emily replied. The nurse nodded, eyes wide. "They're pulling records, emails, everything." Emily felt a slow, steady calm settle over her. The kind that came not from certainty but from having already faced the worst. She was checking vitals in a recovery room when Robert Klein's name came up again, this time not as a rumor but as a summons. Emily Carter, the overhead speaker, called, "Please report to conference room C." Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Someone muttered. Again, Emily finished charting before she moved. Conference room C was larger than the others, brighter, less forgiving. 2 hospital board members sat at one end of the table. A legal representative sat beside them, fingers steepled. Aaron Cole leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his presence unofficial but unmistakable. Robert Klein sat alone. His suit was wrinkled now, his tie loosened. His confidence, once polished and seamless, had thinned into something brittle. "Please," one of the board members said. "Have a seat, Nurse Carter." Emily sat. "This is a formal review," the board member continued. "You are not under investigation. You are a witness." Klein flinched at the word. Emily kept her eyes forward. "Mr. Klein," the board member said, "will begin with you." Klein cleared his throat. "I've already submitted a statement." "Yes," the board member replied, "which raises concerns." He slid a printed email across the table. Emily didn't need to read it to recognize the timestamp. 1:15:8 p.m. 24 minutes after Daniel Reyes stabilized. The subject line was stark. Risk mitigation strategy. Carter. The board member's voice was calm. "You authorized an incident report labeling Nurse Carter's actions as a procedural breach before reviewing surgical outcomes or consulting attending physicians." Klein's jaw tightened. "At the time, we had incomplete information. And yet the board member continued, "You described the intervention as reckless and potentially fatal." Silence pressed in. Aaron Cole shifted slightly. For the record, he said, "Medical review confirms the intervention prevented cardiac collapse." Klein's eyes flicked toward him. "With respect, this is an internal federal inquiry," Cole corrected quietly. "Triggered by your internal response." Emily watched Klein's composure fracture piece by piece. The second board member leaned forward. "You also contacted hospital counsel before notifying federal liaisons despite clear indicators of military involvement." Klein swallowed. "I was protecting the institution." "No," Emily said. The room froze. She hadn't planned to speak, but the word escaped before she could stop it. Klein turned toward her, eyes sharp. "Excuse me. You weren't protecting the institution. Emily continued, her voice steady. You were protecting yourself. The legal representative raised a hand. Nurse Carter. She followed protocol when it mattered, Emily said, meeting Klein's gaze. You didn't. Klein stood abruptly. This is inappropriate. The board member didn't stop him. Sit down, Robert. He did. The board member exhaled slowly. Mr. Klein, you failed to disclose federal interest. You attempted to manage narrative exposure by isolating clinical staff. And you prioritized liability optics over patient care. Klein's voice dropped. You're talking about optics. Do you know what kind of scrutiny this hospital would face if the truth came out? The board member finished. That's the point. Aaron Cole stepped forward. The Department of Justice will determine criminal liability. The board will determine your future here. Klein's face went pale. Emily felt no satisfaction, only a quiet, aching finality. The meeting adjourned without ceremony. By lunchtime, Klein's office was empty. By evening, his name was removed from the hospital directory. No announcement followed. No apology. Just absence. That night, Emily stood alone in the ICU, charting under dimmed lights. The hum of machines felt almost comforting now. Familiar. Honest. A new trauma alert echoed down the hall, this one routine survivable. She moved without hesitation. Later, as she washed her hands at the sink, Linda Whitmore appeared beside her. Linda looked older, smaller. They reassigned me, Linda said quietly. Different department, no supervision. Emily didn't respond right away. I should have listened, Linda added. You were right. Emily met her eyes. Next time, listen to the patient. Linda nodded once, then walked away. Near the end of the shift, Emily's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stepped into the hallway. Hello, it's Daniel, a familiar voice said. Her breath caught. How did you, Agent Cole? Daniel replied. He said you might answer. How are you? Emily asked. Alive, he said. Annoyingly so. She smiled. There's something you should know, Daniel continued. The person who leaked our route, they're being investigated. Domestic. High clearance. Emily leaned against the wall. That's good. It is, Daniel said. But it means things aren't over. She closed her eyes briefly. I figured. You stepped into something bigger than a hospital, Daniel said. And you didn't step back. Emily thought of the needle, the hiss, the silence before the monitor climbed. I couldn't, she said. Daniel paused. That's why they noticed you. They, Emily asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Let's just say he said, finally, not everyone wears a uniform. The line went dead. Emily stood there long after the call ended, the weight of his words settling into her bones. Justice had been served, but justice rarely arrived alone. And as the hospital lights dimmed for another night, Emily Carter understood something with chilling clarity. Some choices saved lives. Others changed them forever. The morning Robert Klein's resignation became official, St. Matthew's Regional Hospital did something it almost never did. It paused. Not outwardly. Not in any way that could be charted or logged. Patients still arrived. Nurses still moved with practiced urgency. The ER still pulsed with life and crisis. But beneath it all, there was a collective awareness, a sense that something foundational had shifted. Emily Carter felt it as she walked through the sliding doors at 6:58 a.m. The security guard nodded to her. Not the polite automatic nod from before, but a deliberate one. Acknowledging, she clipped her badge on and stepped onto the floor, the familiar smells of antiseptic and coffee grounding her. She was back on full duty, now officially reinstated without conditions. The email from HR had been brief, almost clinical. Administrative review concluded. No further action required. No apology. No explanation. Just permission to continue. Emily didn't need more than that. The trauma pager went off less than 10 minutes into her shift. Multi-vehicle collision on the interstate. 3 incoming. 1 critical. The team mobilized instantly. Emily found herself at the center of it without trying to be. Orders flowed through her, not from authority, but from trust. She coordinated IV access, called out vitals, adjusted positioning before anyone asked. Dr. Holloway watched her work from across the bay, saying nothing. When their eyes met, he gave a single nod. That was enough. The patient stabilized. The rush subsided. Life continued. It was during the lull afterward that Aaron Cole appeared again. He didn't come to the floor this time. He waited near the stairwell, hands in his coat, pockets gaze unreadable. "Emily," he said when she approached. "Do you have a minute?" She nodded. They stood in the quiet echo of the stairwell, the hospital's heartbeat muted behind concrete walls. "The investigation is expanding," Cole said. "Beyond the hospital." Emily leaned against the railing. "About the leak, yes. And about who tried to suppress what happened afterward." She exhaled slowly. "What does that mean for me?" Cole studied her. "That depends on what you want." She frowned. "I don't understand." "You acted without knowing who Daniel Reyes was," Cole said. "That matters. But now that you do, you have options." "What kind of options?" Cole hesitated. "The kind that come with attention." Emily stiffened. "I don't want attention." Cole nodded. "Most people who deserve it don't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded card, not an official badge, not a business card, just a name and a number. "Off the record," he said. "If anyone pressures you, if anything feels wrong, call." Emily took the card, feeling its weight despite how little it weighed. "Is this going to follow me?" Cole met her gaze. "Only if you let it." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you did more than save a life. You interrupted a pattern." With that, he was gone. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Ordinary emergencies, manageable crises, the kind that reminded Emily why she'd chosen this life in the first place. As evening approached, Dr. Holloway called her into his office. She stood across from his desk, posture straight, waiting. "I won't pretend I handled things perfectly," Holloway said, leaning back. "I let hierarchy slow me down." "You didn't," Emily said, nothing. "I've recommended you for advanced trauma training," he continued. "It's competitive, and it will put you under more scrutiny." Emily met his eyes. "I can handle scrutiny." "I think you can," Holloway said. "Just remember, competence threatens people who rely on position." She nodded. When she left the office, the hospital felt different again. Not lighter this time, clearer. That night, as her shift ended, Emily walked past the helipad on her way out. The air was cool, the city lights distant beyond the fence. She stopped for a moment, listening to the hum of the building behind her. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He's awake again. Wanted you to know he made it through transport." Emily smiled softly and typed back. "Glad to hear it. Take care of him." She slipped the phone into her pocket and continued walking. Behind her, street, Matthews Regional returned to its rhythm, changed but enduring. And somewhere beyond its walls, investigations continued, truths unraveled, and consequences settled into place. Emily Carter didn't see herself as a hero. She saw herself as a nurse who did her job when it mattered. And in a world that often rewarded silence over courage, the choice had drawn a quiet line, one she would never cross back over. 2 weeks passed without incident. For Street, Matthews Regional, that alone was unusual. Emily Carter settled into a new rhythm, one that felt familiar yet subtly altered. The hospital no longer pressed against her like an obstacle course. It moved with her. Doors opened faster. Requests were phrased as questions instead of commands. When she spoke during rounds, people listened not because of her title, but because of her track record. Respect, she learned, didn't arrive all at once. It accumulated. Still, something lingered beneath the surface. A quiet expectancy, as if the building itself knew the story wasn't finished yet. Emily felt it on a Tuesday morning just after 9:00 a.m. She was restocking supplies when Linda Whitmore approached her. Linda looked different now, no clipboard, no sharp edges. Just a nurse in scrubs, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired but clear. "They reassigned me permanently," Linda said. "Education wing, no supervisory role." Emily paused. "How do you feel about that?" Linda considered the question. "Relieved," she said honestly, "and ashamed." Emily waited. "I built my authority on rules," Linda continued. "You reminded me rules aren't the same as judgment." Emily nodded once. "They're not," Linda hesitated. "I'm sorry." Emily met her eyes. "Then do better next time." Linda smiled faintly and walked away. At 10:17 a.m., the hospital received an unannounced visit, not from federal agents this time, but from the board. Emily wasn't summoned. No one raised their voice. No memos were circulated. The meeting happened quietly behind closed doors with only a few names on the agenda. By lunchtime, word had spread anyway. Robert Klein's resignation was final. No severance, no advisory role. His access credentials had been revoked. The legal department was cooperating fully with an external investigation. There would be no press release, no public reckoning, just consequences. Emily was charting when Dr. Holloway stopped by her station. "They're transferring you," he said. Her heart skipped. "Transferring me temporarily," he clarified. "Advanced trauma rotation. Different wing. Higher acuity." Emily absorbed that. "That's good. It's earned," Holloway replied. "And it's noticed." "By who?" Emily asked. Holloway hesitated. "People who don't usually notice nurses." That evening, Emily stayed late, helping with a complex discharge. As she walked toward the locker room, a man stepped out of the shadows near the stairwell. Not Aaron Cole. Older, grayer. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes missed nothing. "Nurse Carter," he said quietly. Emily stopped. "Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly. "You already did." He extended a hand, not to shake, but to show an ID long enough for her to see it. "Department of Justice." "My name is Thomas Keller," he said. "I oversee special reviews connected to federal operations." Emily's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "Am I in trouble?" Keller chuckled softly. "No, quite the opposite." He leaned against the wall, lowering his voice. "We don't usually intervene in hospital politics, but when medical ethics intersect with national security lines blur." Emily listened. "The individual responsible for the operational leak that led to Daniel Reyes's injuries has been identified," Keller continued. "Charges are pending." Emily exhaled slowly. "But that's not why I'm here," Keller said. "I'm here because when systems fail, we look at who stood firm." Emily frowned. "I'm just a nurse." "Yes," Keller said. "And you didn't ask who the patient was before you acted. That's rare." He straightened. "I won't ask you for anything. Not today. Possibly not ever." Emily studied him. "Then why tell me this? Because sometimes," Keller said, "the safest thing for good people is to know they're seen." He nodded once and walked away, disappearing into the flow of the hospital as if he'd never been there. Emily stood still for a long moment. Seen. The word echoed louder than she expected. Later that night, as rain streaked the windows and the ER settled into its late shift lull, Emily received another message. "Unknown number. Recovery's slower than I'd like. But I'm walking." "D," she smiled and typed back. "That's a start." A moment passed. They asked if I wanted to make a statement. "About the hospital." "About you." Emily's fingers hovered over the screen, and she typed. The reply came quickly. "I said you don't need one." Emily closed her eyes, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. As her shift ended, she stepped outside into the damp night air. The city hummed beyond the parking lot, unaware of the small, invisible shifts that had taken place within the hospital walls. Emily looked up at the sky, clouded, restless, alive. She hadn't sought recognition. She hadn't wanted justice. She had wanted a man to live. Somehow that had been enough to change everything. But deep down, she knew. Not all stories ended with resolution. Some simply paused, waiting. The night Emily Carter truly understood what had changed was not dramatic. There were no helicopters, no suits in quiet corridors, no whispered warnings or sealed doors. It was a Thursday, ordinary, predictable, the kind of night that never made headlines. And yet it was the night everything settled into place. The trauma pager went off at 1:132 p.m. Single vehicle rollover, rural highway, one patient, critical but conscious. Emily was already moving before the announcement finished echoing. Her body responded before her mind caught up, feet carrying her toward Trauma Bay 2 with the same calm precision that had carried her through every defining moment of the past weeks. The patient arrived in pain but alive, fractured ribs, internal bruising, early signs of shock. No mystery, no politics, just medicine. Emily worked the case with quiet authority, calling out vitals, adjusting positioning, anticipating needs before they were voiced. The team flowed around her not because she commanded them, but because they trusted her. At one point, a junior resident hesitated, unsure whether to push fluids or wait. Emily met his eyes. "Now," she said. He nodded and acted. The patient stabilized. When it was over, the room emptied slowly, leaving behind the familiar hum of machines and the low ache of fatigue settling into Emily's muscles. She leaned against the counter for a moment, closing her eyes. This was it. This was the work. Later, as she charted, Dr. Holloway approached her station. "Board approved your transfer," he said. "Advanced trauma unit. Full time." Emily looked up. "When next week?" he replied. "If you want it." She considered the question, really considered it. More pressure, more scrutiny, less room for error. "Yes," she said. Holloway nodded. "I thought you would." As he walked away, Emily felt something unexpected, not pride, not relief, but certainty. The kind that came from knowing she had crossed an invisible threshold and couldn't go back even if she wanted to. Near the end of her shift, her phone buzzed again. "Daniel. They cleared me for limited duty," the message read. "Desk work. Physical therapy. I hate it." Emily smiled. "It's temporary," she typed back. "Recovery takes patience." A pause. "They offered me a commendation," Daniel wrote. I declined. Her fingers hovered. "Why?" The reply came slower this time. "Because the story would have been wrong." Emily leaned back in her chair. "What story?" she asked. "The one where I'm the hero," Daniel replied. "That night belonged to you." Emily stared at the screen, her chest tightening. "It didn't belong to me," she typed. "It belonged to the patient." Daniel's response was immediate. Exactly. When her shift finally ended, Emily walked the long way out of the hospital, passing the ICU, the trauma bays, the quiet rooms where life bent and reshaped itself every day. She paused briefly outside the room where Daniel Reyes had once fought for breath. Someone else lay there now. Another story unfolding. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and rain. Emily stood under the glow of the parking lot lights, feeling the exhaustion in her bones and the calm beneath it. She hadn't set out to challenge authority. She hadn't meant to disrupt systems. She hadn't wanted to be seen. She had simply refused to look away. As she unlocked her car, her phone buzzed one last time. A final message from an unknown number. "People like you are why systems can be corrected." No signature. Emily didn't reply. She drove home in silence, the road stretching ahead of her, steady and unremarkable. Tomorrow would bring another shift. Another patient. Another moment where seconds mattered and decisions carried weight. And when that moment came, Emily Carter would do what she had always done. Stand where she was needed. Act when others hesitated. And choose the life in front of her every time. Not because she was brave, but because she was a nurse. There are moments in life when doing the right thing feels lonely, inconvenient, and even dangerous. Moments when no one is clapping, no one is watching, and the safest option is to stay quiet and follow the rules. But those are the moments that define who we truly are. Emily didn't know the patient's rank. She didn't know his mission. She didn't know the consequences waiting for her afterward. All she knew was that a human life was slipping away and that hesitation would cost more than action ever could. In the real world, systems don't always reward courage immediately. Sometimes they resist it. Sometimes they punish it. But integrity has a strange power. It leaves evidence. Quiet, undeniable evidence that eventually forces the truth into the light. This story isn't about a nurse saving a soldier. It's about choosing responsibility over comfort, conscience over convenience, humanity over fear. Because at the end of the day, titles fade, authority shifts, power changes hands. But the lives you touch, the moments when you stood firm while others stepped back, those stay with you forever. If this story moved, you take a moment to reflect. Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing came at a cost? What choice did you make? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone who needs it right now. And if you believe quiet courage deserves to be remembered, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories are coming, stories that remind us who we are when it truly matters.